Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Sex and Wellness Podcast with Dr. Mary. I'm really excited to be here today with Sadie Minkoff. She's a board certified acupuncturist in Holistic Reproductive Medicine. She's also the owner of Sage Acupuncture here in Austin, Texas. And so today we're going to be talking about acupuncture and how it can affect fertility and other pelvic health conditions. So thank you for coming.
Yeah, my pleasure. So happy to be here.
Yeah. So we'll kind of just get to it a bit and go from there. We'll kind of add on what we need to. And if we have little tangents, we'll circle back. So, okay. So what is acupuncture for people that don't know what it is?
Yes. So acupuncture is really just a tool. It's an instrument with which we can interface with your body and send a message through the nervous system. In traditional medicine, that's referred to as the meridian system. And we can influence health in that way. So the nervous system obviously is connected to everything. It's our communication, right, in different areas of our body to each other. So there's the neuroendocrine system. So we can have a pretty powerful impact on hormones. There's, it's connected to your immune system and support reducing inflammation and balancing and regulating health from an immunologic standpoint. It helps, and hormones, of course, are also a cascade of impact there as well with stress, anxiety, and just mood in general, with healing and repair of tissues, the musculoskeletal system and the digestive system and everything else, right? So that really it's foundational. And what we do is we diagnose people based on what's referred to as pattern differentiation. So we're really looking at the macrocosm and how all these different systems interrelate and how we can impact them and influence health in that way.
I think that's great because that's one of the biggest missing pieces in Western medicine, is not looking at everything as a whole, right? If we look at fertility or issues such as like PCOS, or I did a podcast, I filmed one yesterday on endometriosis. We're looking at it just at the pelvis, but not as a person as a whole. And so what you're saying is just kind of combining all of these things and looking at them can be super important for somebody that's coming maybe directly from test after test after test and then coming to you guys and realizing, wow, I didn't even know that was an option.
With connected. That's right. I treated someone for endometriosis the other day and she would have nosebleeds with her menstrual cycle. And if that is completely connected. But no one had ever mentioned that to her, because no one is looking at sort of the intricacy of that and how the human being and body is relating from day to day, as a unit, right? As a whole system. So it's really important. And we have the luxury to really get to know our patients in a different way. We don't have just, 10 minutes, 15 minutes to get it all in. And our practice is very integrated. So we utilize all of the knowledge of modern lab work and, things like that. But Western medicine really shines when it comes to acute critical issues.
For sure.
We really shine when it comes to more insidious, chronic, ongoing things that, person can often have some influence over as well. So we really take into consideration, lifestyle and their nutrition and other ways, their mental, emotional continuum so that we can, support them holistically.
I think you put it great because obviously I believe in both Western and Eastern medicine. Western medicine saved my life. Eastern medicine helped with my quality of life, right? So the way you just put that in, you're looking at the people that are kind of just tossed away in the healthcare system. They're just kind of like circling in limbo. I feel like those people can really benefit from everything you just described because most people don't realize how it's all connected because we're not taught that in general.
Right. Yeah. Our culture, that's not the approach to life. It's not our life view, right? That even human beings are separate from nature is It's actually a philosophy, right?
Yeah.
A fact. And so what we've done is literally for thousands of years observed the intricate, interconnectedness of all things and how things like the season impact us. I had somebody yesterday who I was just astounded that she saw this observation, but her menstrual cycles were more regular during the winter, which is also kind of not what one would guess, but it's because she was more active in school. She would walk around campus and that was her theory, but she noticed a difference from winter to summer, how regular her cycles were.
I think that's great. I mean, because I think it's important for everyone to track their cycle if you're menstruating, because then you can start seeing these patterns, especially from a PT perspective. If you all of a sudden have this, not all of a sudden, if you have this chronic kind of low level back pain that's just nagging and not going away and imaging shows you're good, we have to look at, well, what else could be going on? But another thing that we talked about yesterday on the podcast was also that another side effect of endometriosis. I feel like I learn so many every day, even other different things that can be a sign of endometriosis. And one of them was bleeding from the anus during your menstruation. And I mean, it makes total sense because the endometrial tissue can attach onto the rectum, but it's crazy because people would think those things are too separate, but the organs are right next to each other.
Right.
So that's interesting about the nosebleed, though. Do you see that a lot?
No, very rarely.
Okay. Yeah.
We're looking at the big picture. She wasn't diagnosed with endometriosis properly. It was a affected situation because we have to actually have
the surgery
to absolutely 100% say yes. So there was all these sort of suspicions because she's having all these different symptoms as well as delayed, conception. And so that one was a really interesting, okay, all the messages are piling up that this is the case. Yeah.
Well, I think a lot of people are underdiagnosed,
Mm-hmm.
and so
eight different doctors on average for someone to be diagnosed with endometriosis.
Yeah, it's crazy. Well, I had Dr. Debo on yesterday. I saw you guys on on I think it was Instagram or something. We were talking about endometriosis and fertility and stuff. And so just even talking about it and having people understand it and how it can affect the egg quality, and even just understanding that, hey, the eggs you're producing today are for 3 months from now.
Exactly.
And having people just even understand their bodies will just escalate their ability to seek care and get proper, the care that they need versus relying on 8 different, you know what I mean?
Yeah. And endometriosis happens to be a very good example of how I work with my Western colleagues.
Yeah.
Intimately and in an integrated fashion, because we are not going to be able to dissolve huge masses, right? Mm-hmm. The abdominal cavity. That really requires a surgical intervention. And then if, tubes are damaged and whatnot, IVF is a great solution to that.
Yeah.
Within that context, though, there's always an inflammatory process happening with endometriosis, which makes so much sense. There's this tissue outside of where it should be in the body, and your immune system is like, what's going on here? We need to attack this foreign thing where it shouldn't be. So it's very zealous, right? Going on. And then your nervous system is also responding with this, hyperness of pain. And those tracks over years and years just get worn down, and that's your system, right? So what we can do after surgery or in the context of an IVF is calm inflammation, right? Calm that down, that immune system, so that things like implantation are more successful, which is, I don't know how much your listeners know, but first they retrieve eggs and then they transfer them back into the uterus. And so there's a higher risk of delayed conception with people who have endometriosis, even though that piece, the endometriosis itself, has been removed and they've already retrieved eggs. They're just putting them back into the uterine environment. And because we suspect, because of the immune system attacking every foreign body, that there's a reduction in implantation. So really important after those massive things are removed to calm the environment and make it as receptive as possible. And that happens on a holistic level, right?
Yeah. It's like anything else in your body, right? When you're sick, you try to, we treat it differently. If you have a cold or something, right? I'm not saying like to rest when you have endometriosis necessarily, but more of, okay, what are you going to do to help your immune system fight this, right? And we talked yesterday even about like how, people think we know like sugar is inflammatory, so it's not necessarily just cutting out all sugar. So some people might not even eat a lot of sugar, but it's the stress levels that increase the cortisol, which then can affect the nervous system and the immune system. We know this for a fact. Like these are studies that are done showing us increased heart disease, increase of diabetes, increase of all, these different things. And so then how does that translate into somebody with a uterus, right? And how that can affect the body, but we're not thinking of them together. And like you're saying, she was even saying yesterday, just all the different non-birth control options, birth control options, and then surgical options. And yes, like we can't, from a pelvic floor, I can't remove somebody's tubes or I can't, do all that. And so it can be a beautiful thing when it's blended.
Yeah. Even when people, we treat a lot of endometriosis, even when people aren't trying to conceive, because their nervous system is still sending those messages of, being on high alert that something is there and it's going to cause pain. And so their system then needs to relearn how to navigate without those masks there.
Yeah. I had always had painful periods growing up. I feel like on this podcast, people are like, I said this last time, they're like, man, what things does Mary not have? But well, when you have like an inflammatory and chronic stressors, right, it's going to affect all these different systems. And so I didn't realize how much like my periods after chemo were insane. And I knew that I had endometriosis because I had a laparoscopy years ago. But I didn't know that it was going to come back like full force. And what I did realize is just what's that?
Certainly can return.
Oh, yeah. And so what I realized is that it was once I started regulating my blood sugar, stress levels, what I was eating, even just walking, cooking more at home or whatever, it was a game changer. But this past cycle I had, I was like down for the count for 2 days because I was stressed. I wasn't eating as well. I wasn't exercising as much, but as much as it sucked, it was also like, wow, like this does work.
And your body gives you a clear message, right?
Totally.
Well, yeah.
Yeah. The silver lining that it's okay that sucked during the day, but yeah.
Yeah. And then sometimes, we don't have the resources in our lives to access care we need and to take care of ourselves the way we would like to. But often it is, especially sort of in our modern lives, it's in our priorities, right?
Yeah.
No one is taught to care for themselves. Not no one. I have had the most wonderful parents bring their teenagers to me and say, I'm teaching you how to take care of yourself so that you have a good life, But really, we're taught work hard, get better results, and so, and I think all of us, and so on some level, internalize that message.
Yes,
real relearning about how to maintain health and to navigate, our lives.
Yeah, the hustle culture, and as you and I know, as business owners, it's real, And for me, it's been a balance, and like you were saying, not everybody has access to these resources, but one of the reasons I wanted to do this podcast is to give people free resources to even know where to even start, because I know such amazing practitioners that align with our values. And if our values align, then it's going to align with the values of the people that listen to this podcast and follow us on Instagram and our social media platforms. And then they can start even advocating for themselves, or even just thinking, even just increasing your steps in a day, parking a little bit further away, right? Those things just take a couple minutes, but they add up. And that can be a big difference too.
That's right. Little things add up. Yeah.
Yeah. So, okay. So we kind of already dove into how acupuncture can help with fertility. And so we've been approaching it from the endometriosis level. What are some other common causes of infertility that you've seen? I'm assuming PCOS as well.
Yep, all the big hitters. We see a lot of PCOS acupuncture has been shown to modulate insulin, right, and support insulin resistance, which is such a common piece in PCOS.
Can you explain that? We explained it in the PCOS podcast, but I don't know if everybody listens to them consecutively. So if you could kind of explain briefly what insulin resistance is so they can kind of understand.
Yes, it's how your body processes sugar, and there's a cascade of events that happen because of that. And one of them is that testosterone or androgens are elevated, which does things like increase acne, male pattern baldness, makes it really hard to lose weight, dysregulates menstrual cycle. And so it's almost as if from a reproductive standpoint, there's like a waxy coating over the ovaries and communication is not happening there. So all of the signaling from the brain to ovulate doesn't get through, right? And it's not being receptive for the eggs to mature and grow and ovulate and then either be conception to happen or not. And so there are often long cycles or absent cycles. And this also leads to embryos that are not as viable. There are increased miscarriages associated with PCOS. So it's a very multifactorial, multi-system situation. It's really challenging for people and it usually does, in fact, take a multi-systemed approach to heal it, So which, of course, has a lot to do with our digestion, which is the foundation of our energy, and we need to take a lot of energy to produce. So we've talked about nutrition a whole lot. We use the acupuncture to resensitize people, and balance hormones. Yeah. And then, of course, carry through the first trimester.
Yeah. What do you find? What are some other common conditions that you might find with infertility?
We see a ton of diminished ovarian reserve. It's literally, I hate this phrase, but it's called advanced maternal age, which is literally anyone over 35.
Like just yes. We were talking about that yesterday. I'm like, okay, we get it.
During pregnancy is what it's called.
Nature doesn't care.
It's interesting. Like we have to take age into consideration. It really is one of the most common factors with decline in fertility. There's so many other things. Like you're going to, be a great parent because you're ready to be a parent, at that point. And that's how life works. And so fecundity is the likelihood of conception every cycle, and it goes down with age. So it's actually supposed to take longer and you might have to work a little bit harder, but that doesn't mean that you're not fertile. That makes sense.
Yeah.
So we do a lot of that. We see a ton of unexplained infertility, which is interesting because unexplained just means we haven't found the answer. Something is going on or something is amiss. Do you know? And acupuncture and traditional medicine really good at looking under the radar of Western medicine and finding those disharmonies and where we can support health. And really a healthy body means that you have enough resources to then devote to the reproductive system. So acupuncture improves uterine artery perfusion, which is blood flow to the uterus and the ovaries. And blood is really just transport mechanism, right? Of bringing oxygen and nutrients and hormones to their target sites and eliminating waste. So that's sort of metabolic process of bringing in the good and eliminating the bad. And so healthy body is a healthy fertility, right, system. So we really want to look at everything.
Yeah. I think the one thing to kind of add to that too is that sometimes people, if you're not getting pregnant, it's not, and you're doing all the things, it's not that you're not trying hard enough. It's just that, so there's that balance too, and being gentle with yourself and also understanding that you're doing your best. And so that's kind of a tough situation, when people are in that.
Yeah. I feel like a theme of this conversation, but it really is true that while we do all the testing and make sure there isn't a big issue that needs to be addressed and how can we address it, it's as important to hold space for processing all of the feelings and taking walks or doing whatever fills your cup. Do you know what I mean? And really balancing those two things out. I think that it's very common. I see that people come in after going through a really hard road of infertility, that then they really appreciate that and understand that it's imperative to really take care of themselves in that way that you're talking about. And just to back it up with some data, as I always like to do, there was a study that showed that the number one reason that people drop out of IVF cycles is actually due to the stress of it, as opposed to finances or anything else. And that acupuncture was so supportive and helpful through the process that people could even just continue their treatment until they were successful, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Yeah. I also wonder too, how quickly, people are jumped to IVF versus kind of going through this stuff and then doing that. And I feel like it's hard if you're at over 35, you kind of want to rush to it, right? Because you're kind of on a timeline there, but maybe even before there's a rush to that's the only option. And so it's important for people to know, hey, you can do an IVF cycle, but if you're doing it in a highly stressed out time, you don't have the time to allow your body to heal and rest and, process the feelings and emotions and all those things. It can be really hard on your body, but it's also not knowing that that's an option.
Right.
That,
knowing your options is key. And then our practice really shines because it's so individualized for each person. And we've been doing this for 20 plus years. So we are very good at supporting people through those decisions. And, I'm always brutally honest with my patients about what their options are and what the best outcomes, are likely to be and what their choices are, right? Like what's really on the table for you. And so we sift through, if you have time, be very well prepared going into any sort of, IVF or IUI cycle, because your outcomes will be better. Do you know what I mean? Not only your experience, but your outcomes. So preparing for it, like, the classic marathon analogy, you don't want to jump right into a marathon. You want to train a little bit for it and be well prepared for that. If there's time, not everybody has that amount of time. Do you know what I mean? Something like premature ovarian insufficiency, we know that there's this chance that their fertility is bleeding potentially rapidly. For the vast majority of people, though, a month or two is not going to change anything negatively. It will only benefit them. Do you know, a lot of people come to us after they're in the middle of it already. Do you know? And so we pick up speed wherever they are. And whenever people get acupuncture, it will be of great benefit. I mean, literally studies have shown very few treatments there was a study last year in 2022 that showed a 55% increase in live birth rates. The vast majority of studies are not live birth rates. They're just, did you get a positive pregnancy test, right? And so pretty profound how full acupuncture is on success rates. So, we really just want to support people where they are. And then other studies have shown a month before an egg retrieval or a frozen embryo transfer can be incredibly beneficial. And we just know from physiology, like you said earlier, it really takes, it takes much longer than this to mature an egg, but there's a lot of rapid cell division about 3 months before that same egg will potentially ovulate. And so if we can nourish and support the environment in which it's growing, which just makes sense, right? That you're going to have better outcomes. When you're nourished and loved and feel good and getting all your resources, you do better. You show up in a different way. So that's what we're doing. We're really supporting and nourishing these growing.
Yeah. Yeah. I know that.
Sperm, I have to not leave that out.
What'd you say?
Sperm as well is 50%.
I was just going to lead into that because I know we talked, last conversation we had, we were talking about sperm. And I think the thing that I see immediately is the person with the uterus or the woman is like, oh my gosh, I need to do IVF because I can't. And I think, well, wait a second. Even though we're saying the sperm doesn't matter, why are we saying that? And I know that you know of one study in particular about, was it marijuana usage that you were telling me about? Yeah. So if you want to chat some about how the sperm can affect it as well.
Yeah. So infertility has been shown to be roughly 1/3 sperm, 1/3, ovaries, uterus, and 1/3 a combination of the two. So it is equal parts, right? Female bodied people it's more complex. There's a lot more we can do. So it doesn't have a direct focus. And we can't, of course, ignore that in society, women tend to feel a lot more pressure, right? To have children and take that on. So, but, and from a Western perspective, for men, it's sort of like, well, you could be on Clomid if you have low testosterone, and then you can do an IUI, which is just, a mechanical, like we're just going to put the sperm a little closer where it needs to be. And then it jumps all the way to, intracytoplasmic sperm ejaculation, ICSI, which is where they, in the context of an IVF, they just inject one sperm, right? I mean, there's surgeries and other things as well, but it's all pretty elaborate, so they kind of ignore that nutrition has a huge impact on sperm, that alcohol, marijuana, all, illicit things have a huge impact. Stress has a huge impact. Heat, right? Your laptop on your lap has a huge impact. And we know that the quality of the sperm contributes to embryonic development, and miscarriages. And so it's just that we need to get people on board more. And there are some tests that they can do now for what's called DNA fragmentation. I don't know if you're familiar with that, but it's really the response to it is reducing inflammation. It sort of comes back to that our bodies are on high alert and in a fight or flight mode. And for whatever reason, if it's just purely physiological or stress or, whatever that cause is. And so when I see couples combine in this and really have like a team approach, profound, the outcomes, right? We can work on one person a really long time and we think everything looks perfect and we're not getting pregnant. Finally, the other person comes in and we're like, okay, yay, success. So
what you're saying technically is that, the way I'm interpreting it too, is that when you're doing this, your partner ideally should be doing similar things to help the quality of the embryo. So you've got, your egg and sperm, and then together that can make an embryo. And so that it's literally 50% of it. So you can do all these things, but the partner or the person with the sperm needs to maximize results.
Yeah. To maximize results. Exactly. Right. Foundationally, we have to recognize that a lot of this is in the stars, right?
For sure.
Our genetics play a huge role. What we're really doing is maximizing our potential with what we have to do.
Yes.
Getting it over that hurdle, and it's interesting because I love working with reproductive health all the way through, right? Menopause, hormonal issues, all of it. But really with pregnancy, it's an all or nothing, right? It's 100% success. Or you have a take home healthy baby or not, so it's really a challenging situation for people. And I think we were talking earlier about any sort of really impactful disease process, but any real challenge in our lives, we would never wish it upon ourselves or or anyone else. But it's such a growth opportunity for people to really come into themselves about what they want, about what, how they want to live their lives. It's pretty profound transformations that I see.
Oh yeah. Anytime you are impacted by a health condition that even if it, for me, even with cancer, I was never told I was going to die. I mean, but it was more of how this is going to change my life. And I say, like I mentioned before, it healed me because I didn't realize how much work I needed to do. And I was living a life that wasn't true and authentic to me. It was what I thought society wanted versus what I wanted as a person. And so I think there's a lot of that too. And are you, who you're surrounding yourself with? Are you around people that are encouraging you to be your authentic self? Because I think we don't realize how much we internalize that too.
Really. Yep. And we internalize the blame as well,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
I'm not living my authentic self, or I'm not. So it's such a slippery slope.
Right.
To be really honest, one thing that I love about the tool of acupuncture, which is part of our complete system of holistic medicine, but as a tool, it is brilliant because you can come into my office and without doing a lot of heavy lifting, right? Or a lot of work on your part, you leave feeling better, right? We reset system. And so I'm such a huge fan of like therapy, but it's still a lot of work,
It is.
Then you have to show up and get acupuncture, but then you receive it, and you leave feeling better. And so I really appreciate that about this modality.
Yeah. And I struggle with it too in being my authentic self. Like, why can't I just show up like my weird self all the time, And then when I do, I get anxiety after. And so it's like,
it's a past for sure.
It's a past. But I think in general, some of the things I asked you was like, when was the last time you belly laughed? Maybe we start there, right? Something that's fun and playful and no pressure. And go to acupuncture and, just kind of have these conversations. That's it, like you don't need these drastic life transformations right away. We know humans, we're creatures of habit, right? And so if we try to take on a habit that's too daunting, we'll do it for a few weeks, then we'll stop. Versus maybe we just walk a little bit more, laugh a little bit more, and be aware of the thoughts that we have that aren't so great.
Yeah. All the time I talk about that really knowing ourselves. We usually know the answer to if we pause in a decision to say, do I need more gentleness in this decision or do I need more discipline in this decision? And very often the answer is gentleness.
Yeah, most of the time but I also think that when you have it focused on looking inward for answers, it's hard to know what those answers are because you have so many other people's opinions and what you should be doing, quoting the word should, because I hate that word, but, so it can be confusing. And so repeatedly, like going to acupuncture or meditating or really kind of taking a beat and just, what is that inner feeling? And you may not know.
Right. That's absolutely right. And our practice in particular is very good at meeting people where they are and creating a structure and a plan that works in their lives because it's a lot, right? To go through infertility. And there's lots of doctor's appointments and all kinds of people, like you said, pulling you in all different directions, so many more. And so we really create a plan that's workable and sustainable so that we're actually shifting their health into a new place instead of just loading up their to-do list.
Yes, we're like that in our practice too. That's one of our biggest things is meeting people where they're at. It's actually one of our core values because everybody knows, oh, you need to exercise, eat healthy, but it's like, what's realistic for you right now in this moment? That's a gentle change, but also gives you the room to realize that, hey, we actually likely need to be more gentle on ourselves. And that can even shift your energy pretty significantly. And then even from like a pelvic floor PT standpoint, there's also visceral mobility. So that means mobilizing the uterus and ovaries, bowel massage, so massaging, showing how to massage their colon on their belly, hip mobility, diaphragmatic breathing, right? And so all of these things blend really well together. Because I also think there's a PT in Dallas, I think it's called Triggered PT. They are really pioneering some of fertility stuff for PT because that's a whole world that hasn't even been tapped into there. So I'm really interested to kind of learn more from that perspective as well.
Yeah. I think, when you were talking, it made me think of just movement. Like when systems are in movement, we are healthy.
Blood flow.
Eating, right. And there's this, chain of reaction happening that should be, then we are in peace and in health. So as long as we're showing up for ourselves and creating the team and the support people around us, then we're moving in the right direction.
Exactly. Yeah. It's that's the start is just even just thinking that way can make a big difference. Even, I know it sounds silly, but sometimes when I have people that are really disconnected from their pelvis due to trauma or repeated miscarriages or repeated surgeries, and I just start having them kind of move their pelvis forward, backward, side to side, and they'll say, "Am I belly dancing?" And I'm like, "Maybe you should take a belly dancing class because get some movement and your pelvis is moving, which helps with blood flow." And you're like, "Oh my gosh, I didn't even connect the two," So I think that's great. And let me see here. So, alrighty. So we talked a lot about the different conditions, how acupuncture can help, and the different people who could benefit from it. And so, just to close up, if people aren't in Austin, how can they find a reproductive acupuncturist? Obviously, send to you guys Sage Acupuncture in Austin, but say they're not in Austin, how could they find somebody?
Yeah. So helping people with resources is like one of my favorite things to do. It really is.
Me too.
And so, so I am available via telehealth. I do like 90% of the work that I personally do is consulting with people. And so I'm available to do that wherever you are in the world. And then we have a list of providers that are board certified and in reproductive medicine in the context of traditional Chinese medicine. And so we can give that to people. We can share that list with people. And then there's also a website that people can look at, which is avorm.org, which is people internationally who specialize in this focus, their acupuncture.
Perfect. And so we'll link your information, your all's Instagram and then your website. And then for the consulting part, do you have a separate website or would it be through Sage Acupuncture?
It's through Sage Acupuncture, which is reproductiveacupuncture.com.
Okay.
And people can just call us and sign up for a consultation.
Perfect. Well, it was so great chatting with you as always. And we will link your info below.
Thank you. My pleasure. Good to talk to you.